The story begins in a hidden room where a man named Frederick was performing black magic. In front of him was a picture of a beautiful girl, and he was trying to cast a spell on her. As the ritual began, Frederick tied himself to a sofa with ropes. Meanwhile, a doctor in the room was sharpening a saw. After getting Frederick's approval, he swung the saw in one stroke, severing Frederick's legs. A fountain of blood gushed out, soaking the entire room. Elsewhere, 3 people were searching for a package in a truck for delivery. The truck had a foul smell, but they eventually found the package. It was none other than the sofa from Frederick's room. The address on it belonged to Frederick's ex-girlfriend, Francesca. Meanwhile, in a nightclub, a band was rehearsing, and Francesca was dancing. After the rehearsal, 2 detectives, Bob and Rosen, approached her. Seeing them, Francesca's friend Maxi, who was also the band's manager, joined them. The detectives revealed that they had found Frederick's severed legs in a dustbin and asked if she knew anything. Francesca denied any knowledge and mentioned that she had even taken a restraining order against Frederick because he had become obsessed with her. The police wanted to question her further, but she had to leave. Her new sofa was being delivered that day. The delivery man, unsure of Francesca's address, asked a shopkeeper, who happened to be Maxi's grandfather, Jack. Jack knew the address and accompanied the delivery man to check out the sofa. As soon as he touched it, he had a strange vision. He saw a young girl running alone in the forest. The sight overwhelmed him, and he fainted. The delivery man helped him up, and when Jack regained consciousness, he claimed he was fine. However, he was deeply unsettled by the girl's tears in his vision. Later, Maxi dropped Francesca home, where her new boyfriend, TJ, was waiting outside, sitting on the newly delivered sofa. Together, they moved it into the living room. Afterward, TJ told Francesca he was heading out to meet some friends. As Francesca took a bath, she didn't realize the sofa was watching her. Later, while relaxing on it, she suddenly felt as if she wasn't alone. Soon, she sensed something touching her in an unusual way. The next moment, she woke up in her bed, confused. At first, she thought it was a dream, but everything had felt too real. Behind the sofa, the spirit of the girl Jack had seen in his vision was now visible. At home, Jack researched the girl and found information in books and from a YouTuber specializing in black magic. He suspected the sofa was haunted by an evil spirit. The next morning, when Francesca woke up, she heard noises from the living room. Thinking it was TJ, she went to check. To her surprise, the sofa was decorated, and breakfast was ready. Moments later, TJ walked out from another room, confused. Francesca assumed he had set it up and happily hugged him, but TJ had no idea who did it. Regardless, she was delighted and didn't question it further. Meanwhile, Detective Bob was reviewing evidence from Frederick's case. Looking at the pictures, he realized Frederick was obsessed with Francesca and deeply involved in black magic. Bob called Francesca to question her, but she claimed to know nothing. However, she admitted that every person she got into a relationship with eventually became obsessed with her. As Francesca was giving her statement, the haunted sofa was now fixated on TJ. Jealous of Francesca's boyfriend, it suddenly pushed TJ onto the stove and stabbed an iron rod into his leg. Screaming in pain, TJ called Francesca, who rushed home with Detective Bob. They found TJ injured and lying in the bathtub. Francesca helped him out, while Bob checked the living room, only to find the sofa sitting there innocently. TJ, terrified, insisted that an evil spirit was inside the sofa and had attacked him. But Francesca didn't believe him and told him to rest. Finally, TJ decided to leave and went to his mother's house. That evening, his mother was watching a meditation class with earphones on. Suddenly, an iron spring from the sofa started attacking the window of TJ's room. Panicked, he opened the window to check outside and was horrified. Francesca's sofa was standing below, staring directly at him. Terrified, TJ tried to shut the window, but the sofa's spring got in the way. Frozen in fear, he stumbled backward and fell to the ground. A sharp spring suddenly pierced TJ's leg. The next moment, a strange energy emerged from the sofa, pulling his soul and absorbing it. Just like that, TJ became the first victim of the demonic sofa. Meanwhile, Jack and his friend Jenny were trying to stop the evil spirit. Jack attempted to enter the spirit world to understand the meaning of his disturbing visions. As he began the ritual, he once again found himself in the same forest where he had seen the girl running. Suddenly, the girl dropped a piece of cloth containing a poisonous flower. The moment Jack picked it up, he was transported to another part of the forest. There, he saw a woman approach the girl with a basket of food. For some unknown reason, the girl suddenly pulled out a knife from the basket, and in an instant, she was dead. The woman was terrified, and a boy hiding nearby, who had witnessed everything. Jack's eyes snapped open, bringing him back to the real world. He told Jenny that the girl in the forest had poisoned someone before dying herself, and now her spirit was trapped inside the sofa. Realizing the danger Francesca was in, Jack decided to meet her immediately. That night, Francesca woke up on the sofa and noticed her underwear on the floor. As she reached to pick it up, she saw a shadow in the bathroom. But when she checked, there was no one there. She shut the bathroom window and turned toward the door, only to see the shadow again. Suddenly, she woke up once more and realized it was all a dream. Relieved, she took a deep breath, but then a noise came from the living room. Grabbing a flashlight, she went to check, when suddenly, the sofa lunged toward her. She screamed in terror and immediately called Maxi. Maxi rushed over and took Francesca to her house, thinking she was still in shock over Frederick's death. Both of them eventually fell asleep. The next morning, TJ's mother was vacuuming the house when she entered his room, only to find his lifeless body lying there. In a horrifying moment, the vacuum cleaner even pulled at his corpse. Unaware of TJ's fate, Francesca returned home, finding the sofa exactly where it was before. Just then, she received a message from Detective Bob, asking her to come to the police station immediately. As she was leaving, her ex-boyfriend Ralph suddenly appeared. He wanted to marry her and start a family, but Francesca had no interest in talking to him and quickly left. As soon as she was gone, Ralph broke the lock and sneaked into her house. At the police station, Francesca was devastated upon hearing the news of TJ's horrific death. The detectives needed to solve the case quickly. Bob called Maxi in for questioning as well. When Bob and Rosen showed them TJ's corpse, they noticed that 2 letters from Francesca's name were carved into his face. Connecting the dots, Bob realized that TJ's murder was somehow linked to Frederick's death. Bob asked Francesca to remove any names she didn't suspect. She immediately crossed off Ralph's name, as she had seen him earlier that morning. After reviewing the evidence, the detectives began suspecting a man named Vernon Lee, a veterinarian. Ralph was inside Francesca's house, checking the security system. What he didn't realize was that it wasn't the cameras watching him, it was the sofa. Ralph then entered Francesca's room and rummaged through her wardrobe. He suddenly heard a noise from the living room, but ignored it. Instead, he pulled out 2 of Francesca's underwear and placed them on the bed. He then got under the blanket and drifted into colorful dreams, completely unaware that the sofa was slowly approaching him. Without warning, the sofa slammed into Ralph's head with full force, killing him instantly. Meanwhile, Francesca was still at Maxi's house. While speaking, she unconsciously gripped Maxi's arms so tightly that it startled her. Maxi asked if she was okay, but Francesca, lost in thought, soon returned to normal. Maxi then left to meet Jack. At the police station, Detective Bob was watching footage of Frederick's recordings. When Rosen joined him, he noticed the same sofa that was in Francesca's house. This deepened their suspicions. Meanwhile, when Maxi finally met Jack, he revealed that Francesca's sofa was under the control of a powerful evil spirit. Maxi, determined to end this nightmare, Maxi decided to go alone to Francesca's house and get rid of the cursed sofa. But as soon as she arrived, she saw Ralph's lifeless body on the balcony. Suddenly, something yanked the body away. Maxi stepped closer and was horrified to see the sofa pushing Ralph's corpse toward the edge. The next moment, the sofa shoved the body off the balcony. Now convinced that the legend of the black magic sofa was real, Maxi tried to slip away quietly. But as she moved, her foot accidentally hit a metal clip, making a noise that alerted the sofa to her presence. Maxi sprinted toward the exit, but the sofa used its springs to slam the door shut. Maxi locked herself in the bathroom and tried to escape through the window. But the sofa was watching her through a hole in the door. As she was about to jump out, her foot slipped. She plummeted straight into a garbage bin below. Her car keys remained behind on the balcony. With Maxi gone, the sofa moved toward the sink. Using its dark magic, it tried to communicate with Francesca. Meanwhile, at Maxi's house, Francesca suddenly heard a voice coming from the sink. It was calling out to someone named Valeria. She leaned in to listen, but just then, detectives Bob and Rosen arrived, startling her. She quickly told them that Maxi had left 2 hours ago. Worried, the 3 of them decided to check Francesca's house. When they arrived, Maxi was nowhere to be found, but her car keys were still there. Francesca called Maxi's phone, and to her horror, she heard it ringing from outside. The detectives followed the sound and found Ralph's body near the garbage bin. As Francesca stood in shock, she suddenly heard a whisper calling the name Valeria again. She turned around and realized the voice was coming from the sofa. Terrified, she ran outside and looked back, only to see the sofa and Ralph's spirit watching her from the window. Frozen with fear, she quickly jumped into Maxi's car and sped away. The next morning, Francesca stood by the sea, crying. She was certain Maxi had suffered the same fate as TJ. But then, she received a call from Maxi's grandfather, Jack. He told her that he finally understood the reason behind all the strange events. Francesca went to meet him and explained that Maxi was still missing and that she had been hearing the name Valeria. At this, Jack's expression darkened. He recalled his research and finally made the connection. Valeria Colette was the girl he had seen in his visions. She and her husband, Gerard, were practitioners of black magic. They controlled souls by poisoning people. But eventually, their dark secret was exposed. Gerard was sentenced to death, and Valeria took her own life by poisoning a woman named Mary. Francesca's eyes widened. Mary was her great-grandmother. Jack then explained that after Valeria's death, her soul entered Mary's body. From that day on, men became obsessed with Mary. This was Valeria's curse, which had haunted their family for generations. This explained why Francesca's boyfriends had all become dangerously obsessed with her. The truth was even more terrifying. Gerard's soul had possessed Frederick, trying to reunite with Valeria once again. However, Jack still couldn't figure out one thing. Spirits usually possess living beings, so how had this one taken over a sofa? He had no answer, but he knew what needed to be done. He prepared 2 special boxes to trap both spirits. Meanwhile, Francesca suddenly had another vision. The sofa appeared before her, and Valeria's spirit was there too. Paralyzed with fear, she barely managed to snap out of the illusion, only to see Jack collapsing from a heart attack. Panicked, she tried to help him, but Jack weakly handed her one of the boxes and instructed her to place it near the sofa. At the police station, Bob interrogated Vernon Lee, who finally confessed that he had amputated Frederick's legs on Frederick's own orders. At the same time, Rosen was investigating Ralph's house. She discovered that Ralph had secretly installed cameras in Francesca's home. As she reviewed the footage, she was stunned to see the sofa moving on its own. Without wasting time, she rushed to inform Bob. Meanwhile, Francesca returned home and attempted to command the spirit inside the sofa to enter the box, but the spirit refused. Desperate, she grabbed a can of oil and poured it over the sofa, intending to burn it. But the moment she lit a match, the sofa mysteriously extinguished the flame. With no other choice, she picked up a knife. In response, the sofa suddenly stood up, like a human, and started moving toward her. Just then, Bob and Rosen burst into the room. Bob immediately fired his gun at the sofa. The bullet struck it, causing it to collapse. And from behind its torn fabric, the burnt body of Frederick was revealed. At last, the horrifying truth was uncovered. Vernon had confessed that Frederick had willingly amputated his own legs to hide inside the sofa. Finally, Bob fired the final shot, killing Frederick once and for all. The nightmare was finally over. The case of the haunted sofa had come to an end. Francesca was overwhelmed with fear. Panicked, she rushed to the bathroom to take her medication, but in her haste, the pills scattered all over the floor. As she bent down to pick them up, a cold hand suddenly grabbed her wrist. It was Valeria's demonic spirit. Before Francesca could react, the spirit entered her body, taking full control of her. Moments later, Rosen followed Francesca to the bathroom. Francesca opened the door and calmly said everything was fine, but something about her seemed different. Meanwhile, down in the garbage bin, Maxi stirred. She wasn't dead, just unconscious. Regaining her senses, she made her way back to Francesca's house. The moment Francesca saw her, she hugged her tightly, assuring her that everything would be okay. But in the mirror behind them, we could see the truth. Francesca was now possessed by Valeria. The next day, Detective Bob arrived at Francesca's house for a routine check-in. But to his surprise, she had decided to keep the sofa. Acting strangely affectionate, she invited him in and offered him tea. Unbeknownst to Bob, the tea was infused with the deadly real flower, the same poison Valeria had used to kill people. Moments after drinking it, Bob collapsed unconscious on the floor. A while later, Rosen arrived, looking for Bob. But what she saw inside left her horrified. The monstrous sofa was absorbing Bob's soul. In exchange, the spirit of Valeria's husband, Gerard, entered Bob's body. Rosen tried to intervene, but before she could act, Francesca suddenly stabbed her in the back. Now fully possessed, Bob, under Gerard's control, finished Rosen off. At last, the savage husband and wife had returned, ready to hunt humans once again. Sometime later, Maxi arrived at Francesca's house in her car. Seeing the door open, she cautiously stepped inside. What she found shook her to the core, Detective Rosen's lifeless body. She immediately called for an ambulance, but before she could leave, something caught her attention. A faint noise was coming from the sofa. As she moved closer, she noticed something strange on one of the buttons. Looking carefully, she saw Francesca's spirit trapped inside, desperately pleading for help. And at that moment, Maxi realized the terrifying truth. Just as Frederick had been imprisoned before, Francesca's soul was now trapped inside the monster sofa. And this is where this strange and chilling story ends. So that's it. Hope you enjoy the story. Subscribe and press the bell icon for more videos.